You ever watch your own private photos flash across a giant office screen while your boss pretends it's a glitch? That happened to me. But what no one in that room knew was that every file he opened, every second of his mistake, was already being tracked. He thought he was exposing me, but in the end, he exposed himself. My name is Rachel. I'm 29 years old. The blinds rattled faintly against the glass as a light breeze snuck through the cracked window. From the 12th floor, downtown Atlanta looked muted under the Monday haze, gray buildings, traffic crawling along Peachtree, and the faint hum of early routine. The conference room was always too cold, lit by that sterile LED wash that flattened everyone's faces into shades of fatigue. Someone's cappuccino steamed near the window ledge, its foam collapsing in silence. The scent of burnt espresso hung in the air, familiar, almost comforting. I sat near the end of the long table, right beside the dying ficus that had been shedding leaves since the end of summer. Its soil had hardened into something more symbolic than alive. My laptop screen glowed dimly, a half-finished report blinking at me. I could hear the faint clicking of keyboards, shoes tapping restlessly under the table, the mechanical sigh of the air vent cycling every few minutes. My mug, no talkie before coffee, pink letters fading, felt warm in my hands, a small anchor in a room that often blurred into routine. Then he walked in. Todd, 39, freshly promoted, always late enough to seem important. His smile arrived before he did, that rehearsed half-smirk that looked good in mirrors, but never in real life. He had a Starbucks in one hand, phone in the other, and that walk, like the world was something he'd already conquered before breakfast. I didn't lift my eyes, but I could feel him scanning the room the way a performer scans a crowd, waiting for attention to gather. "All right," he said, clapping once, his voice loud enough to bounce off the glass. "Let's run the Q3 deck. I've got something special to show." The word special hung there, too deliberate. He glanced at me with a wink, the kind that carried years of unspoken politics. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Just a calm sip of coffee. He set his phone on the sleek black projector hub, our fancy new digital system that mirrored devices instantly, the kind that made tech feel like magic until it didn't. The room dimmed as the blinds automatically adjusted. Screensaver light flashed across faces. He tapped his phone once, twice. And then it happened. The first image that flashed on the screen wasn't a presentation slide. It was a blurry chart, then a Word document, and then silence. A pause so dense it swallowed the air. A grid of thumbnails appeared. My camera roll. Every small square was instantly recognizable to me, even from the far end of the room. My heart didn't race. It just steadied, like my body had already been briefed for this moment. There I was, laughing in flannel pajamas, sitting cross-legged on my couch, mug in hand. Another shot from the cabin trip last fall, mist curling over the tree line. And then Tybee Island, me stretched out on a towel, sun-warmed skin, the sea behind me glinting like glass. Nothing obscene, nothing unprofessional, just personal. Intimate in the quiet way that privacy is. The room froze. The projector fan hummed faintly. Nobody breathed. Jake from accounting coughed, a sound too human for the silence. Cynthia, 2 seats down, muttered a soft, "Oh my God." Todd's face went pale. The kind of pale that has no blood left to defend it. His fingers jerked across the phone screen, trying to minimize, swipe, close. He fumbled like a man watching his own reflection crack. "Sorry," he stammered, his voice strangled. "Wrong folder. Just a glitch." He reached for the cable, then remembered there wasn't one. Everything was wireless now. Everything connected faster than you could think. I didn't move. Just let the scene unfold. "Need a hand?" I asked quietly. My tone was steady. Too steady. He didn't look up. Didn't respond. The cursor blinked in the corner of the screen, waiting. The room's temperature might as well have dropped 5 degrees. I took another sip of coffee. Lukewarm now. A bitter edge to it, but familiar. 3 weeks ago, the alerts started. Cloud sync notifications at odd hours. Files opening from IPs I didn't recognize. my phone buzzing at 2 a.m. with photo-accessed pings. Most people would have ignored them, called them bugs. I didn't, because I'd seen Todd look over my shoulder too many times, heard him mention shared assets too casually, felt his habit of taking ownership of whatever got him praise. So I stopped reacting and started planning. I built a decoy, a digital honey trap labeled plain and boring, camera roll 2022. Inside, I placed a curated set of photos, personal enough to look real, harmless enough to show in public, but each file embedded with invisible trackers, a script my cousin in Cincinnati wrote for me, one that logged every access, every timestamp, every location. A quiet little watchdog hidden in metadata. When Todd accessed that folder, I'd know. When he mirrored it, HR would know, and when he displayed it publicly, like right now, the system would auto-trigger alerts straight to corporate security and IT. Everything was already in motion. Todd finally found the power button and jabbed at it like it could undo what had already happened. The screen went black, but it didn't matter. The silence stayed. The damage had already turned visible. He looked up, sweat breaking at his hairline. "Seriously, it's just a glitch. Don't freak out, Rachel. You should probably stop talking," I said softly. His lips parted, but nothing came out. I saw the flicker of realization move through him, the brief, disbelieving moment when confidence collapses into fear. The door opened. Not a polite knock, not a hesitant slide, just the clean, professional swing of authority. 2 security officers stepped in. Behind them, Darren from IT, clipboard tucked under his arm, badge clipped straight. His presence alone changed the air. Todd straightened in his chair. Guys? Something wrong?" No one answered him. The security team crossed the room without a glance at me. They stopped right behind him, calm and deliberate. The projector light caught their name tags, making them gleam faintly. "Mr. Wexler," one of them said. "You'll need to come with us." Todd laughed, too fast, too loud. "Come on, what? For what?" He turned toward me, the room blurred behind him, just shapes now. "Rachel," he said, voice cracking between charm and panic. "Help me out here. Tell them it was an accident." I leaned back in my chair. My coffee cup was empty now. I set it down slowly, folded my hands in my lap. "You should have checked the folder metadata," I said. He blinked, once, twice, and I saw it. The exact second he realized the setup hadn't just been luck, that he wasn't the hunter anymore. The guards moved closer. One reached for his arm. Todd didn't resist, but the indignation on his face faltered into disbelief. As they led him out, the scrape of his chair echoed across the glass. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was recalibration. Jake looked down at his hands. Cynthia stared at her notebook. Miranda, who lived for office gossip, suddenly found the floor fascinating. Everyone else seemed to breathe in sync, careful not to make a sound that might align them with either side. I closed my laptop, slid it into my tote. The zipper sounded too loud in the quiet. I slipped the empty coffee sleeve inside, a small gesture of finality. Standing, I glanced once at the blank screen. It still reflected a faint ghost of light, as if the image of my photos hadn't completely left the room. "He wanted to put me on display," I said under my breath, mostly to myself, but ended up projecting his own downfall. No one replied. Maybe they didn't know what to say, or maybe silence was safer. I didn't look back as I walked toward the door. The hallway felt different, longer, emptier. The hum of distant printers and phones suddenly distant, muffled. My heels made soft clicks on the tile, and with every step, the pressure that had lived under my ribs for months began to ease. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. Calm, composed, not triumphant, not vengeful, just certain. That meeting wasn't the end. It was only the first move. The elevator ride down from the 12th floor felt longer than it ever had before. Each light above the doors blinked with deliberate slowness, a soft mechanical chime following. Each 1, 11, 10, 9. The motion was gentle, but my pulse wasn't. The faint vibration beneath my feet seemed to echo inside my chest, steady but sharp, a reminder that adrenaline doesn't fade just because the danger has passed. In the mirror-finished steel doors, my reflection stared back, shoulders square, lips pressed together, eyes unreadable. I looked calm, detached even, but under that calmness was a thrum of something clean and electric, not fear, not anger, vindication. When the doors finally opened into the lobby, the air felt colder. The hum of conversation drifted from somewhere behind the reception counter, quick and curious. The scent of lemon cleaner mixed with the faint bitterness of old coffee grounds from the break nook nearby. Maya, the receptionist, froze mid-keystroke when she saw me. Her expression flickered between shock and curiosity before she caught herself and straightened up. "Rachel," she said, lowering her voice as if the walls could be listening. "What just happened up there?" "You'll read the email soon enough." I kept walking. Maya's lips parted like she wanted to say more, but the professional instinct kicked in. She only nodded once, slow and uncertain. Behind me, I heard her phone buzz. Probably someone from the 12th floor filling in the blanks already. In offices like ours, gossip travels faster than any memo, especially when security escorts your boss out before lunch. Outside, the Georgia heat hit like a wall. Sunlight bounced off car roofs and mirrored windows, throwing streaks of gold and white into my eyes. The city buzzed in its usual rhythm, horns, distant sirens, the metallic clang of a MARTA train somewhere down the line. I pulled my blazer tighter across my shoulders, even though the air was thick and warm. My hands trembled slightly as I dug for my car keys. It wasn't panic. It was energy burning through me, the kind that stays after you've survived something. 3 months earlier, I wouldn't have recognized this version of myself. Back then, I was the quiet one in marketing, the one who double-checked her slides twice, stayed late for team effort, and smiled through other people's credit, the one whose work showed up in presentations she didn't attend. Todd used to call me his secret weapon. He meant it like a compliment, but it was never that. He'd lean against the edge of my desk, tie loosened just enough to seem casual, coffee breath close enough to make me lean back without seeming rude. "You've got the touch, Rachel. You make me look good." "That's the job, right?" I'd say, forcing a small laugh. "Sure," he'd reply, his smile tight. "Just remember who signs your evaluations." At first, I told myself it was harmless. The comments, the hovering, the subtle reminders of who held the power. Offices breed that kind of ambiguity, polite coercion dressed in compliments. But one afternoon, when I stayed late to finish a design mock-up, I caught a glimpse of an email thread accidentally forwarded to me. My file attachments, my visuals, my name stripped out of the credits, replaced by his. He called them his prototypes. That was the moment something inside me changed. I didn't confront him. I didn't send angry replies or whisper to HR. I started documenting every edit, every timestamp, every message. I watched patterns unfold the way a data analyst studies anomalies, quietly, precisely, without emotion. Then came the strange sync alerts at night. Photos being accessed from places I wasn't in. Folders opening at 3 a.m. My phone's activity log told me someone had found a way into my personal cloud. Todd was crossing a new line now, testing not just professional boundaries but personal ones. I remember sitting on my couch that night, laptop open, watching the activity feed in real time. File after file marked as viewed. He was scrolling through my private photos, probably thinking it was harmless curiosity or leverage or some twisted thrill of control. But what he didn't know was that he'd already walked straight into a system I'd built to expose him. That was 3 weeks before the meeting. 3 weeks before everything came undone in front of the entire team. By the time HR called that afternoon, my phone had already filled with messages. Coworkers pretending to check in, others fishing for details, a few pretending to be outraged on my behalf. I ignored them all. The email came with the subject line, "Confidential follow-up on today's incident." They wanted a statement, a formal one. I replied within minutes and drove back to the office, my pulse steady the whole ride. I parked in the same spot Todd always used, the one near the side door where the executives came in. Small details matter. The HR suite smelled like printer ink and new carpet. A woman with short hair and tired eyes met me at the door. "Rachel, I'm Karen." She led me into a small conference room with beige walls and too much silence. She clicked her pen open, poised it over a legal pad. "Thank you for coming in so quickly." I handed her a flash drive and a printed folder. "This should answer most of your questions." Karen scrolled through the files on her laptop, her expression changing with every page: screenshots, file logs, IP traces. The paper stack in front of her was thick. "Rachel," she said quietly after a long pause, "this is incredibly detailed." "I work in data analytics," I replied. "Patterns are my thing." "Did you know he would access your camera roll today?" "I didn't know the exact day," I said. "Just that he wouldn't be able to resist touching what didn't belong to him." She studied me for a long moment, pen resting between her fingers. Then she leaned back and exhaled. "I've handled plenty of internal cases," she said, "but never one like this." He thought. "I'd stay quiet," I said. "They usually do." Her tone wasn't cold. It was weary, like she'd seen this story too many times with different names. When I left HR, the sun was already starting to dip behind the skyline, washing the glass towers in amber light. The day had shifted. Something irreversible had happened, and the air itself felt different. That evening, I sat alone in my small apartment in Marietta. The blinds were half closed, stripes of light flickering across the floor. My cat, Clover, slept curled into a soft white loop on the armchair. The city outside buzzed faintly, a distant heartbeat. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages from coworkers poured in. "Oh my God, what happened?" "You're trending on our Slack channel." "He deserved it." "You're a genius." The words blurred into noise until one message caught my eye. It was from Miranda, the one person I'd expected to stay silent. "Miranda, he's suspended, indefinitely. People are calling you a genius." I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I locked my phone and set it face down. I didn't need to respond. I opened my laptop and clicked on the folder labeled Closure. Inside were months of carefully preserved evidence: the presentation drafts he'd deleted from shared drives, the Slack messages he'd sent past midnight, the HR compliments he'd turned into leverage, even that awkward message thread where he tried to blur the lines between mentor and something else. Scrolling through them, I felt something quiet settle in my chest. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was symmetry. For months, I'd existed in the shadow of someone who thought control equaled power. He built his authority on borrowed ideas and charm, on the assumption that no one would challenge him. But today, in that boardroom, with a single mirrored screen, I'd flipped the equation. I closed the laptop slowly. The soft click of it shutting echoed louder than it should have. The faint smell of cinnamon lingered from the candle I'd left burning earlier. Outside, the sky had turned a deep slate, clouds bruised with the promise of rain. Clover stretched, yawned, and nestled deeper into sleep. Thunder rumbled far off, low and drawn out. A flash of light flickered against the window pane, painting the room in a brief silver glow. Atlanta storms always came this way, fast, loud, unapologetic. I stood by the window and looked out at the wet reflections of streetlights beginning to shimmer against the asphalt below. My own reflection wavered in the glass, a ghost of someone who'd finally stopped running from quiet humiliation. "She stole my story," I whispered, barely audible even to myself. "I rewrote the ending." The next morning, the office didn't feel like the same place. There was a quiet that didn't belong there. Not the usual sleepy stillness that hung over early mornings before the caffeine hit. This silence had a pulse. It was heavy, layered with unease, like the building itself was holding its breath. Even the elevator chime sounded muffled, a polite echo instead of the cheerful ping it usually made. When the doors opened to the 12th floor, the hum of keyboards and chatter that normally spilled out was gone. The air felt colder. Every sound, heels tapping, printers whirring, the faint murmur of the HVAC, seemed distant, hesitant. the rhythm of routine had been broken, and no one wanted to be the first to restore it. I stepped out, holding my tote close against my side, scanning faces that didn't want to be seen. Cynthia passed near the break room, clutching her reusable mug like a lifeline. She met my eyes for a fraction of a second and gave a small nod. Half acknowledgement, half respect. A quiet gesture that said more than words could. Jake didn't look up from his screen. He always had something to say about everything, numbers, jokes, weekend plans. But today, his gaze stayed fixed on a spreadsheet that probably wasn't moving. Miranda, who normally had her phone glued to her hand, sat at her desk, staring straight ahead, the device face down for once. At my workstation, a manila envelope waited neatly in the center of my desk. The HR letterhead peeked through the top corner. The edges were sharp, as if it had been placed there carefully, deliberately. I sat down, slid my finger under the flap, and unfolded the contents. The language was formal, cold but precise. Administrative suspension pending investigation. Unauthorized data access. Policy review under Section 14. But between the lines, I could hear it. The quiet apology they weren't allowed to write. The subtle recognition that something had gone very wrong and that I'd been right all along. At the bottom, there was a separate sheet. Different font, different tone. An offer. I stared at it for a long time before I even read the words twice. Later that afternoon, I stood inside a glass-walled conference room, the one HR used for follow-ups and damage control. The city stretched wide behind the windows, a faint shimmer of traffic threading through downtown. Karen sat across from me, her posture the same careful balance between professionalism and empathy that HR people mastered over years of mediating disasters. "What's this?" I asked, tapping the second page. "Interim team lead position," she said, smoothing the papers in front of her. "Your work on the Keller pitch was noted by senior staff. They'd like you to oversee the next cycle while this sorts out." "And after that?" I asked. My tone was calm, but I could hear my own voice slow down, each word chosen carefully. Karen's lips curved in a small, knowing smile. "Depends how loud you're willing to be." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. My silence had already become a language everyone in that office understood. When I got back to my desk, the inbox on my screen lit up with new messages. 3 of them marked urgent. Subject lines repeating my name like a brand that had just been rediscovered. Follow up on today's discussion. Rachel's report, Keller account. Team handover notes. For once, my name wasn't buried beneath someone else's. It looked right there, bold and unedited. Mine. But power, real power, doesn't live in titles or printed letters. It lives in what you know and when you decide to let others know you know it. So I didn't celebrate. I waited. I watched. While the company scrambled to contain the PR ripple, I went home and dug deeper. Because instincts told me Todd's actions weren't isolated. He hadn't just accessed my photos out of curiosity. There was something underneath it. A reason. A trail. Todd had used his company phone to access my files. The logs my cousin built didn't just show views. They tracked attempts to send, to transfer, to delete. The data came in like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Small, disconnected. But together they formed a pattern that made too much sense. I spent nights at my dining table, laptop glowing against the dark, tracing each time stamp. Friday, 11:14 p.m. Wednesday, 2:47 a.m. Times when he shouldn't have been working, yet the activity spiked. Then I found it. The file I'd planted weeks earlier, titled Marketing Projections Q4, Confidential, hadn't just been opened. It had been forwarded, not to his company email, to a private one. My cousin traced the IP. It wasn't Todd's home address. It belonged to a residential account in Smyrna, registered to someone named Lynn Parker, Todd's sister. I stared at the name until the connection snapped into place. Lynn worked as a consultant. I'd heard her name before, mentioned casually, as if she were just another contact in his network. But a recent press release from a rival firm downtown mentioned her team winning a contract with a suspiciously similar proposal to the one I'd developed. That's when it all fit. This wasn't just about control or ego. It was theft. Corporate sabotage. He hadn't only violated boundaries, he'd sold them. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the screen reflecting off my glasses, the cursor blinking on an email draft I hadn't started yet. My apartment was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and Clover's soft breathing from the armchair. I thought about the word revenge. It never felt right to me. Too loud, too messy. What I wanted wasn't revenge. It was accountability, precision, balance. So I built one last folder. I labeled it for legal only. Inside, I placed everything: screenshots, IP match logs, cloud access reports, meeting calendar overlaps that aligned too neatly to be coincidence. A digital paper trail so clean it could walk into a courtroom on its own. When I was done, I stared at the folder icon glowing softly on my desktop. It looked harmless, small, but it held the weight of everything that had been taken from me. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with the legal department. No one else knew. Not HR, not my team. Just a calendar block labeled Documentation Review. I wore black slacks and a navy blouse. Professional but forgettable. My hair tied back, no makeup. Just facts. The conference room was cold, the blinds half closed. Two lawyers sat across the table, flipping through printed pages in silence. They didn't ask many questions. They didn't need to. Each page turned like a slow realization. By the time I finished walking them through the sequence of events, the silence had changed. It wasn't disbelief anymore. It was focus. A week later, the internal memo went out. Short, sterile. Employee termination, breach of contract and confidentiality violation. No resigned. No parted ways. Just terminated. His badge was deactivated before noon. His office cleaned out by Friday. The elevator doors that once closed behind him now opened for someone else. For me. The following Monday, Karen caught me in the hallway. She didn't make it official, just leaned in with a quiet smile. "Nice work on the Keller restructure," she said. "You've earned it." I didn't need more than that. But the best moment came on Thursday. Monthly staff meeting. Same room, different atmosphere. The blinds were up this time, sunlight cutting through the glass and scattering over the table. No projector, just paper handouts. Old school. People filed in slower than usual, unsure of the tone. A few whispered. Others just sat, waiting for someone to take the lead. Karen cleared her throat. "Rachel will be running today's agenda," she said. "She's leading the Keller restructure." No applause. No announcement fanfare. Just quiet acknowledgement. I looked at the seat Todd used to take. It wasn't just empty. It had been replaced by me. I set my notes on the table, glanced once around the room, and said, "Let's begin." Miranda caught my eye from across the table and mouthed, "Told you." I didn't smile. Not yet. Not until the last slide, when the numbers spoke for themselves. Because revenge isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a shift in the air, a name on a folder, a chair at the head of the table. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, the early light creeping across the tiled wall of my apartment. The glass was fogged from the shower, beads of condensation running down like a clock marking quiet seconds. My reflection looked different, not older, not worn, but clearer. The faint lines under my eyes weren't from exhaustion. They were from release. It's strange how much lighter the world feels when you stop carrying the weight of someone else's silence. The kind of silence that forces you to fold yourself smaller, to blend in with the hum of compliance. Now, for the first time in months, I could breathe without waiting for another shoe to drop. I tied my hair back, the elastic snapping gently against my wrist. The morning air from the cracked window was cool, faintly touched with the scent of rain on concrete. I tucked my phone into my coat pocket and glanced toward the small envelope resting on the console table near the door. Cream paper, black ink, the kind that looked deliberate. My handwriting was neat, almost ceremonial. A handwritten address. A return label with my full name spelled out cleanly beneath it. That envelope wasn't just paper. It was the last piece. Inside was a printed statement, succinct, notarized, factually airtight. A summary of digital misconduct, time-stamped evidence, and internal sabotage documentation. This one wasn't for the company's records. It wasn't for HR. It was for the state licensing board. Todd wasn't just a manager. He held a professional license, data ethics, and digital privacy compliance. The kind of credential that came with fine print about moral responsibility, about trust, about lines that couldn't be crossed. And Georgia law didn't offer soft landings for licensed professionals who exploited personal data for gain. He had crossed every line the moment he weaponized my photos. I slid the envelope into my bag and stepped outside. The Atlanta sky was pale, washed in that brief colorless tone it gets before the sun truly commits. My car sat under a sycamore, the windshield catching thin reflections of clouds drifting by. Traffic murmured on Howell Mill, a slow crawl of commuters with coffee cups in hand. The USPS station was small, brick front, glass doors smudged by 1,000 fingerprints. Inside, the air smelled like paper and toner, a strangely comforting scent. A woman in a blue polo behind the counter looked up and smiled, that soft customer service smile that never really reaches the eyes. "Certified mail?" she asked. "Yes," I said, handing it over. She weighed it carefully, slid it into a bin, and tore the sticker from her roll. "Here's your tracking," she said, handing me the slip. I peeled the sticker and pressed it onto the corner of the envelope like sealing something permanent. It felt final, decisive, quiet, like closing the lid on a story that no longer belonged to me. Then I turned and walked away. Didn't look back. The bell above the door jingled softly as I stepped into the sunlight, the hum of the city swallowing me whole again. Back at the office, the rhythm had changed. There were new hires, faces too eager, voices too bright. The energy was different, lighter but uncertain, a company adjusting its pulse after an earthquake. The carpet smelled new in some corners. The projector cables had been replaced. A notice near the elevator reminded everyone about data privacy best practices. But the whispers lingered. They always do. People still turned when I passed, their conversations dipping, pausing just long enough for curiosity to fill. The silence. Rachel, the girl with the slideshow. Rachel, the woman who brought down her boss. Rachel, the reason the projector policy got rewritten. They didn't say it to my face, but their eyes carried the stories they told at lunch, in hushed tones between printer runs. I could feel the weight of it, but not the shame. Because it was never about humiliation. It was about exposure. Todd's mistake wasn't in showing the photos. It was in assuming there was power in trying to shame me. He thought the world would see a woman embarrassed, undone. He didn't understand that I had already turned his gaze into evidence. He didn't realize the stage he stood on wasn't his, it was one I built. Every move he made only pulled back the curtain I'd stitched shut behind him. Now, every time someone mentioned my name, it carried something he never had: credibility. Miranda and I started having lunch again. It began tentatively, an unspoken truce after months of distance. One afternoon, we sat in the break room, fluorescent light flickering above us, the hum of the vending machine filling the space between bites of turkey sandwiches. She toyed with her straw before speaking. "He used to send weird messages to me too," she said quietly. "Late at night. Nothing explicit, just off." I looked up, meeting her eyes. "Why didn't you say anything?" Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't think anyone would believe me, until you didn't flinch." For a moment, neither of us said anything. The refrigerator buzzed. A microwave beeped down the hall. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping in a way that looked like release. "That's why I didn't yell," I said softly. "I didn't want them to hear noise. I wanted them to hear truth." Miranda nodded, her eyes glistening but steady. The way people look when they realize the world didn't end after all. It just tilted into something fairer. Sometimes power doesn't shout. Sometimes it's a whisper that keeps echoing long after the door closes. A few days later, a company-wide email hit everyone's inboxes. Subject: Compliance Update and Ethics Training. The message was sterile, full of bullet points and policy reminders, mandatory courses, annual certifications, digital ethics and privacy standards. Todd's name wasn't there, but his shadow ran between every line. They were rewriting the story now, trying to frame it as a procedural correction, a company effort, a cultural renewal. I let them. It didn't matter who got the credit for change as long as the rules no longer allowed silence to thrive. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need a headline. Sometimes knowing you shifted the foundation is enough. That Friday, I clocked out early. The sun was still high, the kind of bright that makes the city shimmer. I drove to Piedmont Park, windows down, the radio low. Some old pop song that felt lighter than it should have. The park was crowded, but peaceful, the kind of chaos that feels alive. I found a bench near the pond, the one shaded by oaks that curved low over the water. Ducks drifted lazily near the edge. A little girl tossed crumbs from a paper bag, giggling as they splashed closer. Her mother stood nearby, half watching, half scrolling on her phone. I pulled out my notebook, opened it to a blank page, wrote a few words. Nothing profound, just pieces of thoughts, fragments of things I hadn't said aloud. The breeze tugged at the corners of the paper. The air smelled of warm grass, sunscreen, and coffee from a cart somewhere behind me. The city buzzed around me, people jogging, laughter echoing, the faint bark of a dog chasing something unseen. It felt normal. Beautifully normal. And for the first time, I didn't feel small inside it. Not because everything was fixed, not because the world had become fair overnight, but because I'd stopped shrinking to fit it, because I'd learned that strength doesn't always roar, it sometimes just stands still and breathes. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the sound of the water and laughter blend into one long, steady rhythm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving. I was existing. A month later, the letter arrived, heavy envelope, embossed with the gold seal of the state of Georgia. It sat on my kitchen counter for a full minute before I opened it, my fingers tracing the ridges of that seal like it might disappear if I blinked too fast. The return address read, Digital Ethics Division, State Licensing Board. Inside was a single page, white, crisp, official. Notification of license revocation. Todd's name was printed clearly at the top, the font sharp and unflinching. Beneath it the words, Verified data breach and violation of employee privacy. That was it. No long explanations, no apologies, no spin, just a statement of fact. I sat there for a while, the paper balanced across my knees. The afternoon light stretched across the couch, pale gold slipping through the blinds. Clover purred softly on my lap, curling into a small ball of warmth that reminded me the world could still be gentle. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Not like victory, more like gravity. It took me a full minute to name what I was feeling. Closure. No confetti. No dramatic ending. Just the kind of justice that lands quietly without applause, leaving nothing to argue with. It doesn't roar. It settles. The following weekend was the company's annual Employee Appreciation Dinner. Todd used to host it like a performance. Every joke rehearsed, every compliment carefully distributed to whoever he needed next quarter. The idea of going made my stomach twist, but staying home felt like erasing myself from the story I had rewritten. So I went. The event was held at a hotel ballroom near Midtown, the kind that smelled faintly of citrus polish and champagne. Chandeliers glittered overhead, scattering light, across the rows of round tables covered in white linen. A small jazz trio played near the corner stage, the music smooth enough to soften awkward laughter and unspoken memories. When I walked in, heads turned. Not sharply, not in gossip, just in quiet recognition. Miranda caught my eye first, smiling wide as she waved me over. Her dress shimmered faintly under the lights, her confidence newly restored. Across the room, the VP raised his glass, a silent acknowledgement that carried more weight than words. Near the buffet, Karen stood talking to another HR rep. When she spotted me, she smiled, the rare, real kind that starts in the eyes before it reaches the mouth. I took a seat near the back. Didn't need the spotlight anymore, didn't crave it. Power didn't live at the front of the room. It existed in how still you could sit and still be felt. The dinner rolled on, polite laughter, clinking silverware, the predictable speeches about teamwork and innovation. The hum of conversation grew softer when the lights dimmed. Someone walked to the front to announce the slideshow. Highlights of the year. That sound, the hum of the projector, made the back of my neck prickle. That same quiet whir that once marked humiliation now hummed again, soft and steady. The screen flickered white, then filled with images. The Keller campaign launch, the rebranding rollout, a short clip of the client presentation that had gone viral on LinkedIn. My name appeared at the bottom corner of every frame. Then, one final slide. Lead campaign strategist, Rachel Thompson. The applause started slow, then grew. Not loud, not theatrical, but warm. Genuine. I felt it ripple across the room, steady as the heartbeat of something new. The same projector that once betrayed me was now illuminating my work. The irony didn't sting. It glowed. I clapped once myself, quietly, just to feel the moment ground me. It wasn't triumph. It was balance returning to its rightful place. Afterward, I lingered by the coat check, waiting for the crowd to thin. The air was cooler there, faintly scented with perfume and rain drifting in from outside. Karen found me first, her heels soft against the carpet. "You know, Rachel," she said, handing me my coat, "not many people could have done what you did." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean stay quiet?" She smiled faintly. "I mean stay smart." Her hand rested briefly on my shoulder, steady, deliberate. He underestimated the wrong woman. I didn't reply. I just nodded, a small, wordless agreement. When I stepped outside, the city was awash in drizzle. Streetlights blurred into soft halos, the pavement gleaming like liquid glass. I drove home through 10th Street with the wipers moving in slow rhythm. Atlanta's skyline glowed in gold and violet through the mist. I turned the radio off halfway down the stretch, preferring the quiet pulse of rain against the windshield. Back home, I changed into sweats, poured a glass of wine, and sank into the couch by the window. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd lit earlier. Clover leapt up beside me, curling into the crook of my knee. Outside, the rain softened into a whisper, tapping faintly against the glass. It struck me then, how peaceful revenge can feel when it's not about destruction, but correction, when it's not about shouting louder, but restoring the quiet you were once denied. He had tried to make me small. I hadn't fought to be bigger. I just refused to disappear. My silence had turned into something louder than his arrogance ever could. The laptop pinged once from across the room. A new email. I hesitated before checking it. Subject line, Internal Ethics Board, Policy Credit. I opened it slowly, half expecting another formality, but the words that followed were simple. Effective immediately, the new Digital Privacy Reform Initiative will be named the Rachel Policy. I laughed softly, shaking my head, not out of pride, but something gentler. Recognition, maybe. The cycle had completed itself. The same institution that once made room for silence now codified what it meant to speak through precision. I set the phone down, leaned back, and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, the room didn't feel too big. The quiet didn't feel like absence. The city hummed outside my window, lights flickering through the drizzle. Somewhere downtown, a late train screeched against its rails, distant but steady. I closed my eyes and heard my own voice echo from months before. He wanted to put me on display. But in the end, he only projected his own downfall. The words didn't sound like revenge anymore. They sounded like release. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.